We've got guys that are journeying through recovery right now. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. Really thankful for all of you guys joining us today. And yeah, Lisa, you got it.
No, I just want to reiterate that we realized this morning that our journey with this started about 8 years ago. Well, I mean, the whole thing started a lot longer, but our discovery day was about 8 years ago this time, so it's very timely that you all are with us today.
Yeah.
And we're celebrating this new start. So, first up, Sheila.
All right, so our first guest today is Sheila Maitland. Surprise. First on the docket.
You ready?
Yeah, let's go. Sheila's one of the most well-respected therapists in the area. She's been doing this a few years.
Yeah.
And I've participated in Sheila's trainings, quarterly trainings, and they're amazing. Sheila's been working with individuals, couples, groups, and families for how long, Sheila?
Probably 30 years.
30 years.
It
Yeah.
says 20, but it's 30.
Sheila is a certified sex addiction supervisor and has a focus on addiction, helping people recover from unwanted behaviors. So she works with her clients to help discover the cause of their pain, uncover trauma, and really heal these wounds, right? So she's really the perfect person to help us understand intimacy disorders and how they develop. So really just going to do a question and answer format today. And I'm really excited to have Sheila's expertise here. So, Sheila, you ready?
I'm ready.
right.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, to start off, can you just tell us, like, what is an intimacy disorder?
You know, I would use the mic. Yeah. And then
Oh, you'll need to press the button on the screen.
Oh, no pressure. Hi everybody, I'm Sheila Maitland. What I would say is an intimacy disorder is anybody whose relationship with their own self, with their own intimacy that has been harmed in some way, either by ridicule, by judgment, by violation, humiliation, creates a relationship with how somebody feels about themselves and obviously how they would feel in their intimacy. So it's a very broad definition and does not mean that you have to have been physically assaulted, and people with physical assault have also often have an intimacy disorder. In fact, I don't know in my 30 years of working that I've ever met somebody that does not have an intimacy disorder. That's how I would answer that.
Thanks, Sheila. So, do your clients with intimacy disorders typically know that they struggle with authenticity and connection?
No. No, in fact, I like to share this story that probably when I went off to college, my reference point for intimacy had to do with horoscopes, alcohol, and lighting. To me, that is what informed intimacy. I did not know what intimacy meant. I knew what it meant to be seeking approval from others, and whether or not they liked me is what made me feel okay. It had nothing, I was not tuned in enough to know whether or not I liked the other person. It was very disordered and very innocent. I came out of a looking good, feeling bad family. We were normal.
So, I wonder if you could describe like a common scenario in which you've seen like this intimacy disorder develop. I mean, you already touched on it a little bit. You know, perhaps like maybe take an example from childhood into adulthood, so maybe we can see, you know, what they look like, how they manifest. Easy question.
I've been asked this before. Is the microphone too much? Is it okay? Okay. I'm trying to use an example of something that is really benign because I'm not trying to traumatize anybody in the room. Because I know that even talking about intimacy can be dysregulating. And so the story I'm going to share is about somebody retelling their story to me over time, where at age 6, this woman could hear her parents having relations, and then she would also hear them fight. So both things were really paired for her at 6. And there was no awareness that that had anything to do with how she was showing up in her intimacy. And it turned out that her parents divorced, and she was very parentified and took care of her mother. So when her mother started dating and then fell in love with some new man at age 10, she really wanted her mom to be happy. So when this new man would do some things, and it was never physical, it was only verbal. I say only. It was verbal, and it made her feel awful. She had no idea that that was informing and going to show up in her inability to participate and be fully present. What she learned how to do was be incredibly dissociated for her intimacy. That is as much as I want to, you can get sort of a picture. And there were lots of inappropriate things said to her in secret. So we've got this pairing of secrecy, some intimacy disorder about how she felt about herself, and some pairing of intimacy and fighting all before she'd gone through puberty. And it really impacted. She came to me wondering how and why this happened to her, feeling responsible, feeling like it was her fault. Yeah.
Thanks, Sheila. That's one example, and I wonder, are there any other common themes that you've seen in the experiences of the clients you've worked with that battle this? What were the missing ingredients that are maybe pretty across the board common in their critical development phases?
Well, I'll ask this question in here. I often say this. So raise your hand if you got really helpful, age-appropriate, sexual and intimacy information growing up.
Sheila, no one's hand is raised.
I'm aware. I think that says a lot. And I'm also really an advocate and believer about the concepts of child development, and that a little one only has what they see and feel in their home as a reference point, and it is mired in their DNA and in their nervous system. And so the unwinding of that is really difficult to even help many people who are quite protecting or armored around that experience. It takes a lot of relationship, safety, and connection to begin to unwind that, both for men and for women. And so I think when you try and look at the context with which people begin to have a relationship with themselves and their intimacy and their body, it's pretty mind-blowing. And of course, disordered intimacy is profound. It's the tsunami, yeah.
How does having an intimacy disorder, really call it sex addiction, call it love addiction, porn addiction, like whatever, it's a big umbrella term, like how does it impact a person's emotional growth and identity development going into adulthood? Because it can be obvious when someone has this issue, like a little context. So I often find that men create this false identity or armor to try to earn love and approval. They can be likable, they can be charismatic, they can be outgoing, they can be fun. Sometimes why friends and family are in total disbelief, right, when the acting out behaviors come to light. It's also why maybe sometimes spouses are criticized initially and made to believe that they're the issue. Like I want people to understand and expect this so they don't damage the couples by maybe putting them in like maybe traditional couples counseling where the focus is, maybe on one thing, any information you have or questions to ask, look for.
Well, comment first. I have been in circles as a woman where in the circle, what was being suggested was how to accept something that's unacceptable. How do you take your partner's behavior that I'm struggling with and try to be okay with it? Like maybe I need to do more of something to keep his attention, which is a way of blaming. Like if I were to wear something, if I were to suggest something, if I were to try to do something if I work harder at this, I wind up being responsible for my partner's behavior. Another way of saying that is, so if my partner is struggling with money, with finances, and I say to my partner, well, why don't you just give me all the money and I'll give you an allowance? Lots of couples say this. Lots of couples think that this is the answer. It is a little bit like saying, and what I heard in this circle is that I should deny my discomfort and do these things, and that I will satisfy my partner. That's messed up. That, on so many levels, puts the responsibility of whatever is not working in the relationship on what I should wear. Like completely missing what's really happening. And I think the thing that I'm so aware of when I work with people is how dissociated in problem sexual behavior, how dissociated both partners are. Nobody's having a good time, and nobody's feeling safe, even though there might be this perception that so-and-so is doing such and such, and da-da-da-da. I don't think anybody, at least when I work with people that are really at the end of the road and in some serious trouble emotionally, physically, spiritually. Nobody's having fun. And there is this, I don't know how to look inside. I feel so much shame. I feel so much shame in society. Like, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go talk about this? Especially when I've talked about it and they told me to wear these clothes at night. It's kind of messed up. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think there's a lot of misinformation, and I think that safety is what is missing. There's not the emotional safety, and it goes way, way back. And that's why this is not a 6 weeks in this group and you're gonna be better. This is like a lifetime of how do I begin to know my own story? And of course, how do we first of all stop the insane behavior? That is a non-negotiable. That is How do both people that are affected get wise, helpful, and meaningful support that is not shaming and re-traumatizing? And to a traumatized person, it's really difficult to know. It's very difficult to know what I'm even talking about. So aligning with places like Room to Heal. Room to Heal knocked on my door the old-fashioned way and said, I'm here. I remember when you called me the very first time and you introduced yourself and you talked about your own story. Very classic, I need to do better in here, in my own healing, before I can have an impact on others. And that is what is so profound and beautiful about Room to Heal.
Thank you, Sheila. I love, you talk about safety and how important safety is to this healing process, to this healing journey. And as we'll hear a little bit, like I couldn't find that, and I spent over a decade trying to find that. And I love that you identified that as one of the key ingredients. And I really appreciate you sharing with us this morning. Thanks, Sheila.
You're so welcome. Thanks, everybody.
So next we have Dr. Sophia Caudle, who's going to join us, and she's going to chat with us about how these unwanted sexual behaviors remap the brain. Dr. Caudle owns Queen City Healthy Sex and Relationships, based here in Charlotte, as well as Bull City Psychotherapy in Durham and Wilmington. She's a licensed clinical mental health counselor and supervisor, certified sex addiction supervisor, certified sex therapist. And in 2025, our plan is to collaborate with Dr. Sophia Caudle to offer our clients neurofeedback. So we're really excited for her to help us understand how these behaviors can really affect our brain and how to fix it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. This is working, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's so great to be here this morning. Thank you so much. I'm Sophia, Dr. Sophia, as you heard. I'm also Sophia, a woman very grateful to be in recovery myself for over 2 decades. ACA, SAA, Al-Anon, and CODA. I'm also a betrayed partner 2 times over. So I'm very comfortable in these rooms as a human, but also as a professional. So I'm just grateful to be here myself and to be doing my own work so that I can speak on these topics and hopefully make brain neuroscience make sense. Because when I read about that stuff, man, it's hard to understand. And so for me, I need to make it make sense and make it be really simple. So yeah, what kind of questions do you have happening?
Well, Sheila just spoke about intimacy disorders, and I'm hoping that you can just in a general sense explain what happens in the brain when someone with an unmet need for intimacy is presented with pornography or attraction from the opposite sex, and really begin to medicate with that.
Right, so kind of piggybacking what Sheila was saying, we all have unmet needs. So no one on the planet gets everything they need, ages 0 to 5. And when we experience or are shown pornography, for instance, at a very young age, that's actually considered trauma on our brain. So it's something that our brain has not experienced the development to be able to understand and process what we're seeing and what we're hearing and what they're doing and what's going on. So it's actually traumatic. It does also begin the development of someone's arousal template in the brain, so if someone is going to become an addict later in life, if they haven't learned how to meet their own needs, then being a sex addict is probably going to be in there somewhere. So what it also does when people are exposed to a lot of attention, a lot of affirmation or validation, or pornography, or some kind of sex addiction, acting out behavior, if we have these unmet needs and we're older, it's going to feel really good. So that's going to be like, wow, lots of dopamine hits are happening. Oxytocin is being felt. That's that love addiction chemical, and really what's happening is the creation in the brain of this new neural pathway that makes us believe this is what we're supposed to be doing because it feels good, and these people like me, and when I behave in this way, I'm getting this validation and affirmation, and so we're just strengthening the addiction neural pathway when that happens, and it's a pretty dangerous path that's really getting stronger.
So there's similarities to how the brain responds to pornography and how the brain responds to other drugs?
Yeah. So there's really only one addiction neural pathway, whether someone is a crack addict, or they smoke pot every day, or they look at porn every day, or they frequent strip clubs. It doesn't matter, like gambling. There's one addiction neural pathway. And I remember for me, I've been a therapist for a really long time. I've been in the field of sex addiction for probably half of that time. I was kind of like on the fence, honestly, like, oh, and this is before, obviously, I was in recovery, by the way. I was like, oh, denial's a really cool thing, right? So I'll never forget going to my first CSAT training and seeing the superimposed images of the porn-addicted brain right on top of the crack-addicted brain. It was exactly the same lit up places. Sheila, you probably remember that too in those trainings back. I don't know that they even do that today. But I was like, oh wow, this is a thing. And so it's an addiction. You know, there's just the chemical addictions or the process addictions. And the process addictions are kind of sneaky. They're very sneaky. And so, you know, you're not going to necessarily get a DUI if you're a sex addict. You're gonna, the wheels are going to fall off some other way. And it probably takes longer, and it's just sneakier. But it's addiction just the same. It's the same neural pathway in the brain.
Almost to a man, the guys that I've worked with that have battled multiple addictions have said that this particular struggle is the toughest one to let go of. Right? So what is needed for the brain to begin to start to rewire itself, to let go of some of these unhealthy neural pathways?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Just like Sheila was saying, you know, the first order of business is we must get sober. There must be, you know, I don't know how many people in this room have heard or done the 90 days. Like the brain research is pretty clear. There's got to be a minimum of 90 days of complete sobriety for the slightest shift to happen out of addiction into recovery and sort of more normal, unclouded thinking and the ability for the other parts of our brain to be able to function again. So sobriety is the first order of business for sure. What's next is really, it's the process of learning, again, more of what Sheila was talking about, learning how to connect, learning intimacy, first we must learn how to connect with ourselves. What is that? Well, that's really good therapy. It's really good 12-step over and over and over again, having a really strong community around you and building that sense of self that's within us, that development. Most caregivers don't know how to pour that into us because they didn't get it themselves. So we have to continue that development and connect here and then connect with others. And, interestingly enough, that social bonding neural pathway, when that neural pathway gets a lot of activity, when we are in deep, healthy relationships with others and we're giving ourselves our needs, we're meeting our own needs, then when that social bonding neural pathway is activated a lot, the addiction neural pathway, it gets very, kind of like quiet, and it doesn't get as much activity, and it kind of starts, getting dried out, and it's just not as actively used. So we end up operating more in health and recovery. So it's really sobriety and connection and continued recovery are paramount.
Well, you just touched on the answers to my next question. It's like, what are the signs that someone's moving into recovery? And it sounds like that community, connection, sobriety.
Yeah, I think those are definitely the things to do, but I think if we're talking to partners, the signs would be less blame onto the partner, less irritability, more willingness to do the things that we know we need to be doing, taking more responsibility. So those are the things that, I really like to have partners really just paying attention to. Is someone less defensive, more agreeable to, sure, look in my phone. Yeah, here's what I've been doing. I've got no secrets. You want my bank account? Here you go. And so I think that willingness to be transparent and, forward moving, and I call it making the reach, that willingness to make the reach is, really what I like to look for also.
And you've already touched on this, but like, how integral is community in this process?
It's the only path. No one gets recovery alone. That would be like a complete oxymoron. And so, recovery cannot happen without connection and intimacy. So we can't have, I guess we could, like if we lived on an island and there were no people, we could certainly make that happen. But we are here. And so, it's something that we have to do. We have to connect. And, that's also what we've just known for almost 100 years now with AA. That's how those guys built that program was, when I want to take a drink, I'm going to call my guy.
Right.
And we didn't know about neuroscience back then, but wow, did it work. And so it's that community. It's not the white knuckling. White knuckling keeps us sick. So being sober and being celibate doesn't mean we're healthy and in recovery.
Right. Now, obviously, our Room to Heal's model is based around, therapeutic separations for the couple getting some space, from each other. How have you seen couples taking that space help them heal?
I think for the right couple, with the right support, with the right planning and the right contract, I have experienced therapeutic separations being extremely beneficial and helpful for so many reasons. Just a few main reasons. Whenever a couple is struggling in this very toxic, codependent, painful struggle, it's very hard to live in the same space and kind of share that tense energy and be able to pull that apart and focus on your own self and your own work. That is very difficult. And sometimes that can happen, but not often. That usually ends in a very sad way for couples, honestly, because one person ends up breaking. Whenever we can do a therapeutic separation, the opposite usually happens. People can finally breathe again. People are finally sleeping. Partners feel a lot safer. And it's also, the recovering addict feels a lot better because there's less criticism, less scrutiny, less blame back and forth, honestly. And when we have a contract on the front end with a good therapist of, okay, let's just plan everything. Who's going to pick up the kids? How are the bills going to get paid? Who's going to live where? Who's moving? Who's staying? Are y'all switching? When we have everything planned out, everybody knows what's going on. There's really no work to do except for the personal growth work of recovery for both people. So it can be a very freeing situation, and for a lot of people it can be what brings them back together of, I really know that I want to be back with this person. I'm going to keep doing my work to end up with them. Or sometimes it's very clear if somebody's not doing their work and the other person, maybe will still try to stick it out, and that's great, but that's also an opportunity to make a personal decision if it's not right to stay in something that's going to be unhealthy for the duration. And that's an individual decision. But, as long as it's done with a team and not a couple just willy-nilly, like, let me read this book and, I think we can do this by ourselves. I don't think that's a good idea. But doing it with a supportive team that knows what they're doing can be a really, really lovely outcome.
I love that. Thanks, Sophia.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Awesome. All right. So now Lisa and I are going to share a little bit about our story. And it's the first time we've tried to do it in this condensed format. So we've actually got some notes. And so just, give us some patience and grace as we do this here.
Yeah, I just think it's so important because there's so much secrecy around this. Couples go through this and you never hear it. And it's just so important for these stories to get out there so that when someone finds themselves in this situation, they know that this is not the end. I'm not the only person who's ever gone through this. And so we're being brave to help those people. And yeah, do you want to get us started?
Yeah. So what I tell pretty much every guy when they first get to the heel, and there are some in this room, is, I'm so sorry that you're here, and I am so, so glad that you're here. Because that's really how I feel about my journey. I hate the pain that my struggle has caused, and I'm so thankful because it's enabled me to relate to and empathize with pretty much every single man that's walked through our doors, regardless of where they are in their recovery journey.
So, 8 years ago, like I was saying earlier, a few weeks before Christmas, oh, sorry, am I going in the wrong spot? Oh, goodness, thank you. Let's see. Now I gotta walk myself back.
So, Lisa and our recovery coaches, our partner coaches can really relate to the partners as well. So it's not just me relating to the guys struggling with, the addiction, the struggle with intimacy disorder. We really have Lisa and our partner coaches that can relate to the lives of spouses because they've been there too.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when we talk to women, it's the first time they've ever spoken to someone who's been in the same situation. And I'm really glad to be able to be that person to let her know that she's not going crazy.
So a little bit of backstory about me. I was really teed up for this struggle. Exposure to porn at an early age, check. Family history of mental health woes and addiction, check. Oldest of 4 kids and kind of a golden child, check. Family focus on being good rather than being real and present, yep. And of course we cannot forget confusing sexually charged trauma, my early childhood, right? So when I was getting bullied in 6th grade and discovered pornography, this incredibly powerful way to escape, numb out, temporarily feel safe, I got hooked very quickly. And then when I realized that getting a girlfriend made me feel even better, I was just locked into this thing.
What do they say in the meetings? Aren't we supposed to talk about the solution more than the problem? Because that sounds like a lot of problem.
Yes. So Suffice to say, this thing had a deep hold on me, and we're gonna just fast forward so you guys can figure out what that meant, to 2006 when I went to my first SAA 12-step meeting, Sex Addicts Anonymous. And though I knew I belonged there, I couldn't let go of the shame, which had been a foundational part of my life. So over the next 11 years, I picked up enough white chips to tile the New York subway. I went through sponsor after sponsor. I did multiple IOPs, intensive outpatient programs. I did a weekend intensive in Minnesota in the dead of winter with Dr. Mark Laser. I tried hypnosis. I tried to use religion to get better. I did church programs, I memorized Bible verses, prayer retreats, and nothing gained traction to help me. I tried to get a woman to fix me. That marriage did not last more than 2 years. Quickly got divorced, and then a year later, I was engaged to this lovely lady.
Yep, and on my end, after my first marriage ended in betrayal, I was determined that I was going to end up with a good, healthy man. And so I did therapy, and I got this great big book on codependency, and it is highlighted for days. But then over the next 3 years, I went on a little over 100 first dates. I'm not lying, most of Charlotte. And nothing happened. I was just, meeting new people and trying to find the right person for me. And my wisdom and intuition and my skills that I had learned in childhood brought me to this guy as my top choice. And clearly something was off.
I mean, other than being an alcoholic, love addict, porn addict, I was really healthy. So after Lisa and I got married, I continued to get worse. I kept trying to fix myself and failing, and eventually just tried to figure out how to live with it. I just resigned myself to, okay, this is my lot in life. This thing had become my closest confidant, my answer to life stressors, my safe place, and ultimately, it was my best friend. It really was. Deep down, I knew I had become really, really sick, and I did want to heal, but I truly was powerless over this. And the Lord had to take me to I'm getting emotional here. The Lord had to take me to some incredibly painful and dark places before I was willing to get 100% honest, full, transparent, honest.
Yeah, so back to what I was saying earlier. 8 years ago, a few weeks before Christmas, on a day like today, we were on a walk together and it dropped the truth bombs of all truth bombs.
I just went full scorched earth. It was a good therapist's worst nightmare. I was sick, I was in an affair that I didn't want to stop. I decided to go to inpatient treatment for this to prove that the feelings that I had for this woman were legitimate and were not a byproduct of my addiction. So I left my wife and my 1-year-old son, and I went 90 days to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and for the gratitude program. It's an inpatient treatment program for sex addiction.
They fixed Tiger Woods.
Yes, they did. Debatable. So, and I need to be very clear at this part. Some people absolutely need inpatient treatment. We refer people to inpatient treatment programs all the time. But I don't think I needed to do another trauma egg. I'd already done like 4 of them. So I needed to learn how to do life in recovery, right? What I needed is how to really be in community, be in authentic connection. And I really got that chance afterwards. We still weren't ready. I was still a hot mess after 90 days. So I went to this little sober living home in Montana. And it was there, living with other men, just as sick as I was, that I finally felt safety, to let people in and really become fully known, right? And God used the courage and willingness of Jesse, Chris, Ryan, Tom, to let me try on what it felt like to be fully present and with what I was feeling on a daily basis. It was really there that I began to slowly let go of the toxic relationship that I had with my drugs of choice.
Yeah, and while he was prancing around in the mountains of Montana, I had the space to have my own healing journey. And it was a hard time. We had to Airbnb our house to make ends meet. We moved in with, my son and I moved in with my parents. Andrew had left for inpatient on Christmas Eve, and so it was a tough time, but I really got to lean in with other women who were going through this and focused on myself, realized very quickly that there was something in me that was drawing me to help unhealthy people, and I needed to get to the bottom of that no matter what happened with Andrew. And to be honest, the first marriage died while he was gone, and that was a good thing. It really burnt to the ground while he was gone. But luckily, I got a call. Well, there were a few crazy emails that were sent that I guess took him to his knees. And then I got a call that said, I want to make this work.
And so Lisa came up to Montana and to visit me. And really the time apart that we had to lean into our respective healing journeys allowed us to really let go of the unhealthy relational patterns that we developed while we were together. And so after an additional 3 months at the sober living home, I moved back home. And Lisa now calls me her third husband.
Two.
Yeah.
Much better.
And so after about 2 years of being back together, we were still doing some therapy and really just, still on our recovery journeys. Lisa looked at me one day and said, there needs to be more places like where you went in Montana, but maybe even more specialized to meet the needs of this struggle, and thus Room to Heal was born.
Not quite.
So I did have some reservations. Like, how in the world could we pull something like this off? Who am I to do it? So we started praying, and really the Lord started opening doors. Room to Heal opened in the spring of 2021. And, in our continued vision is a place where men can really, really lean into their recovery journeys, where men can live with mirrors that reflect their own pathology, their own mess back onto them. It's a place where guys can be safe, where their partners can feel safe, because we do have the pragmatic things in place. We do have the things that help get that sobriety that we really do need, right? So that we can move into the deeper work that it takes to heal from this thing. And my life was saved by other men, by being in intimate, healthy relationships with other men, incredibly, incredibly sick men. And it was a beautiful, beautiful time. And so really, at the core, that's what we try to provide. We try to provide this place where men can really, really lean into this confounding struggle, where their partners can feel safe, and where we can help both parties, right, move into their own recovery, and hopefully, God willing, come back together as much healthier people and move towards the lives that really they deserve. So that's a brief version of our story. Thank you. Barry, you're in the hot seat next.
Follow that.
Make sure it's green. Oh,
Yeah, make sure it's green. So Barry, welcome. Barry's been our house leader for a little over a year with a brief break. He went on vacation. He's the one who lives in the house with the guys and just does life with them. And just want to pick Barry's brain a little bit on seeing the men move into recovery.
You just hit me after this emotional thing right now. I'm like, what is it like?
Well, I'll ask this. So how's the house helped you heal and lean into your authenticity?
Well, for me, very similar stories of what I'm hearing from you. I always saw myself as not having a traumatic childhood. I spoke with my sister the other day and I said, things during our childhood, it was great, right? She said, yes. The house has helped me to realize just where a reflection of my life to look back and hear other people's stories and just suddenly realise that there were traumatic things throughout my life. It didn't necessarily have to be a physical side of things, that there were traumatic things. And that was something, I'd always, my mother had grown up with in the generation of suck it up, get on with it kind of thing. As a single parent family, it was very driven in be independent, be strong. And so there was never a show emotions side of things. And my mother was always encouraging in the way of everything was, you did great. I'm going to get a C at school, and it's still great. So it was this continuously always, everything was a positive thing. So I just see that positive side of things all the time. And I thought life was great, and realised that this hidden world was gradually creeping in, overtaking everything, to the point that the house helped me to realise that the blame that I put onto my wife before was actually a huge part of it was me. I realised how much I was broken and how much my actions had broken her. Just kind of dug in there, and the house gave me an option to really reflect and look at myself in a way that I had not done before. I felt like I looked at myself before and checked the boxes of, I went to this meeting and I attended this church and I read this book. Well done, pat on the back. Not me, it's you, kind of thing. And the house really helped me. So it's been, I would use the word life-saving in that aspect side of it. But yeah, there's not words I can put to being grateful and thankful for that.
We have, the house has a bunch of rules, right? So how have you seen, the program, the accountability, the rules of the house help men find that sobriety that maybe they've been struggling with? So we get a lot of guys that have been going to meetings for a long time, like me, picked up white chip after white chip.
Whenever I think any addict sees rules and then my old guidelines, we're like, I'm good, I've got it. So there's the expectation is guidelines rather than rules. The guidelines, the encouragement around these is to do X, Y, and Z. For a lot of them, again, I don't need this, I don't need this, or I'm the exception, I've got this thing, it doesn't count for me. My position of really pushing them and holding them accountable to say, great, you telling me you're going to go to a meeting is one thing, but now I need to see it. And when we start to see that uncomfortableness of stepping into this realm of guidelines and somebody following up with them, is actually going to ask them the question, tell me about the devotion, tell me about this, what was happening. You start to realise that they've got to follow things. And when they get that stability and there's a foundation that's there for them, it helps them to be more confident going into the day, knowing that they've got some kind of plan and structure. And my sponsor always used to say to me is, do the next right thing, be prepared. What you do on the weekend? I'd be like, I don't know. You don't have a plan. Like, come up with a plan, and these rules help them to be prepared.
As I mentioned earlier, doing something like this, moving into a place like Reveal, it is like living with mirrors, right? That reflect your own stuff back onto you. Inevitably, conflict, challenges arise between residents, but even just their daily lives as they do life. Have you seen the environment help guys navigate that?
Well, I have a great example of myself in the way of I approached Andrew once before, just saying how is it I can approach this, and how can I phrase this conversation with a particular resident. He said to me, what is this true? What does this upset you? And he said, you're looking at yourself. I said, no, I'm talking about that's not me. And then suddenly I sat there and I was like, it is me. Every defect I have is reflected in the people around me. And suddenly I got to learn again more about myself. And I got to see the defects of myself and other people. helping me to again learn more about myself. But it'll also help the other men around to see what happens when it comes to conflict. Is most of us want to avoid it, or we think we can control it. We're going to control our wives, our partners, our family. So for them to suddenly have somebody that's just as strong to push back and is stubborn as their way just as much as we think is our way, those conversations suddenly become honest conversations. They suddenly have to recognize their feelings and express those feelings to each other. And what makes the house good in those conflicts is that we've got the ability, again, in that safe environment, to have the conversation with each other. We have to face conflict, face consequences of our actions within the house, and for it to be in a way where they're not as scared of what the outcome is going to be if they were at home with their wife having that same argument. This is a conversation which helps to build upon that, so they can take those skill sets and move into family life as well.
Thanks, Barry, and pray for Barry, because Barry lives at the house. So he has these guys coming in and out. So all Barry gets is reflections of his own character. Just please pray for Barry.
There's been some knocks on the door at 1:30 in the morning, or the 5:30 in the morning, and in the middle of the work day, it's just like, hey man, you got a minute? Absolutely, man.
Yeah. So please cover Barry in prayer. Thanks, Barry.
Is Terry still in here? Could we grab the other mic? Could you help us grab the other mic? Please, thank you.
We said
in case you're saying something good.
We said a little bit about community and being part of the community. I will say, it's a great thing to stand and listen to the story of Andrew and Lisa at this point, but I will say that, like I said, life changing for me is there have definitely been people at the house, but I do want to give a lot of thanks to these guys as well, because there's been a time when I felt alone and hopeless, and they've given me what I felt was self-worth again. So I'm very appreciative of these guys. I just want to take this moment while we're finding the second mic to do that. So thank you to both of them. And I've learned that when I met Andrew, I was like, man, this guy's great. It's like really pushing me into the thing. This is the person that pushes Andrew. So I'm turned off.
Oh, well, you're about to meet the woman who pushes me. So, in all good ways, I'm going to welcome Amy up here. Amy is an extremely special person to me, and I'm so glad to have her be part of our team, because I want to start by saying that Amy was her husband was one of our first residents, and so Amy was one of our first partners in the house, and we did it together. And I'm so proud that you're sitting up here. The healing woman, the journey's never over, the healing woman that you are. So I'm so thankful. And she has been pursuing education like crazy. She's doing the ABSATs, which is partner trauma, trail trauma training that is specific to this. It's the best. I love it. She's also done the early couples empathy model with us, and she's right now doing, what is the group you're doing?
Is it working? It's
Can you hear me? It should be green.
great. A Door of Hope.
A Door of Hope, and that is a really intensive group training. So Amy is up here. to talk about the partner program. And I'm so excited. You know, at first it was me working at Duke Energy and helping partners on my lunch breaks and in the evenings and making it work. And we decided partners just needed a much bigger focus. Having your husband be away, though it can be, you know, really helpful, it's not helpful unless you have the right community of support. And at Room to Heal, now partners have Amy. They've got a dedicated coach they can call or text. They've got weekly coaching sessions, and then they also do couples connection sessions. So once a week, we try to get both coaches and the partner and the resident together so that they can have conversation. And it's not couples therapy, it's just trying to walk them through the basics. You know, we hope that they'll hold off on any intense conversations that come up during the week, as it does, and just gives them a way to feel heard and validated. And then there's also a group. Amy, the women love Amy's group. It gives them access to other partners in their same situation, and they start to lean on each other, which is beautiful. So let's talk first about when these women come to us. They're mid-trauma. A lot of people talk about the PTSD that comes with betrayal trauma, but when we find a woman who's just found out in the last couple of weeks that her husband has this completely other life that she knew nothing about, she's not in post-traumatic stress. She is mid-trauma, and she's in fight or flight or freeze, and she doesn't know which way is up. And you know, a lot of times the first people you tell what's going on don't end up being safe people or validating. So, Amy, I'm hoping you can talk first a little bit about the trauma of this experience.
Yeah, so like Lisa said, it's always trauma when you find out that the person that is the most important person to you is not who you thought they were. It immediately sends you, your brain goes offline. And what happens is the hippocampus, the left side of the hippocampus, which is kind of like the timeline of your life, it's like neatly ordered files of everything that's gone on in your life. It's like your partner has come out and opened the drawer and just dumped all of the files out. And then on top of that, come up with a stack of new files that are really, really painful and really, really scary, and dump those files in with it and just kind of mix everything up. And because our brains are designed to keep us safe and alive, we go into a panic because all of a sudden nothing makes sense anymore. And then what happens is the amygdala, like Lisa was saying, goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And for me, as a partner, that showed up. I was heavy into the fight, which Lisa remembers. You know, bouts of rage. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't, like words would just leave. People would be talking to me and I wouldn't even, you know, sometimes I would disassociate. It's like I was outside my body, you know, watching myself, you know, it just is a very disorienting feeling, dysregulating feeling. And then because my brain was not knowing how to keep me safe, because it didn't know what was safe anymore and what was not, my body started being affected. I rapidly lost weight. I lost half of my head of hair. I was completely under functioning. There was a lot of that first year I don't remember at all. I remember a year and a half. I think it was Sheila that saying it doesn't happen in 6 weeks that you get better. A year and a half into it, I was heavy into the grief. I remember my mom was on the phone with me driving in the car, and I was telling her that I felt like I was in a really, really deep place of grief. And I drove straight into an intersection in a parking lot and got broadsided. And it was an added trauma that, because I realized that I didn't even look, you know, I just drove in it. And it's so important to recognize that it is a trauma and it's happening to us. You know, we're responsible at that point and to getting help and to doing the work we need so that we don't live in that state all the time. But it's just so dysregulating, so life-changing.
Goodness. I didn't realize that's how that accident happened until right now. Oh my goodness. Help us understand how, normally when you're going through a traumatic event, someone has died, other things, like people know how to help you.
Right.
But in this case, people don't know what to do and they can be harmful. Can you talk a little bit about how friends and family and, people that are normally your support system
Yeah.
can be unsafe?
Yeah, it's not typically done maliciously, because you don't understand it unless you've been through it. And a lot of times people will go towards sympathy, and that sympathy can kind of be this kind of thing, like, oh, I'm so sorry, or minimizing it, saying, all guys watch porn, just get over it, why are you still feeling like this? And even to the point of spiritual bypassing as well, like using God as a reference to stop the behavior, like it's, all we have to do is forgive or submit, all the things. And it just adds more shame and more loneliness and more trauma.
Yeah, definitely. And so what does she need for healing?
Safety, which I know everybody's talked about, safety. And even, it's helpful if the guys in recovery can help us with that, but even not, just learning grounding techniques, self-care, anything we can do to kind of get back online. And so with that comes stability, empathy, my favorite, where we need a lot of empathy, and community, which I know is the same for the recovery community as well. And I think one of my favorite things that Room to Heal does is we do monthly partner events. And because another thing that happens is that, when I said the file cabinet is on the floor, the entire file cabinet is on the floor. It brings us back to what if our childhood was safe, like any past traumas come back up. We have to spend the time to put every file back in place, and some of them are easier to do than others. And so, when, even going to the grocery store, sometimes it's like, who knows me and I don't know them, and what's gonna happen here, because anything can happen now. And so the partner events are meant to bring, we add self-care events. We've done pottery and yoga, kitten yoga, which is so fun. Pickleball, yeah, that was really fun too. And just things to kind of get our bodies moving and have that community, but you don't have to worry about who else is there. You don't have to explain anything. If somebody walks in crying, we're like, yeah, you go, we get it. But that's one of my favorite community, but it's just like the recovery community, it's so beneficial not to do it alone.
Definitely. I think, I went into a cocoon for about 2.5 years where I really didn't care to get into any kind of deep conversation with anyone who wasn't in this community, because you just don't understand and you end up defending yourself and, getting upset. So, let's see here. This is my favorite question. So, Andrew talked about why we came up with Room to Heal, and really my reason was because I wanted to empower women to be able to get some space and figure out what they want and need, and to help him want to get healthy, to get some space, because of my group of 7 women that I was with in group therapy who were my rocks during my time, who, while Andrew was an inpatient, were looking at me like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not her. Love them to death, but my story was whoo. But only 2 of us from that group are still married. And they suffered for a really long time and never really got to the place that Andrew and I did. And so I realized that they needed space. So please talk to us about how we empower partners, because they're a big part of Room to Heal.
Yeah. I think the first thing we do is we do a boundaries exercise with that. And just really going through what she, giving her choice again. What does communication look like? What do you need while he's in this stage? And that, even though it's not, boundaries are a huge part of this, but it gives us grounding, it gives us footing, it gives us, a feeling of control again because so much has been taken. And we can't control what they're doing, but we can decide what we need and we can ask for it. And then they can choose whether to do it or not, and we can choose how we react to that.
Yeah, we had a partner the other day that said that Room to Heal is the only part of this process where she felt like she had a choice in the matter, and that I was really glad that we were able to give that to her. So what are you guys seeing from partners after this time apart? A lot of them come in and they're like, I'm done, you take him. But what are we seeing at the end of this journey?
Yeah, I'm seeing partners not just choose their own recovery, because it is easy, especially when you're feeling all the feelings and all the trauma is coming at you. It is easier just to say, I'm just not going to do it. It's just too much work. It's not my problem. But, when they have the space to really focus on themselves and hopefully see some change in their spouse as well, they're choosing to stay, because the opportunity is that the relationship is better than it could have ever possibly been, because a lot of marriages with or without addiction maybe are not all that healthy. And we're getting to the deep core woundings of what's going on. And a lot of times at the beginning, I didn't want to stay. I mean, everybody says, if this happens to me, I'm leaving, And so that's what I expected to happen. I didn't really think I had a choice, at that point. And so having the separation to really focus on myself, to not have him in my face all the time, to constantly be re-triggered by, his existence, really helped to even be able to be grounded enough to see the change in him, so that we can move forward in that way.
Yeah, Pastor Dickey is going to speak with us next, and I'm so excited. And one of the things he said in a sermon recently that really spoke to me is that God doesn't make us choose him. He gives us the freedom to choose him, because love comes with choice. And so when these women feel like they've got a choice to stay or go, the resentment goes away, and we see really, truly healed, wonderful marriages. Dickie, thank you so much for joining us today. We joined City Church about 2 years ago. Andrew had loved our church before, and I just felt called to go somewhere different, and we went to the first sermon, and there must have been 3 signs from God in that sermon that were like, we're in the right place now, and they've been so wonderful to us. We would not be here today without the student pastor Obi back there. Thank you for helping us, and Pastor Dickey set us up with an office in the life group house so that we were able to meet with couples outside of the residence, which is very comforting for the women, and it gives them a neutral territory. So it's so wonderful. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for us.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And, I tell you, as a pastor, I've been a pastor now for almost 35 years. I truly appreciate counselors. I've been counseling myself as well, and I can tell you how important that is. And I think, to be a good counselor, you got to ask good questions. Ask good questions, you get good answers. And actually, Lisa, one of the things I've been doing here lately is I collect questions. And some of them are a little silly. I thought about them this morning. One question I've always had as a child, if Gilligan and the professor could make a radio out of a coconut, why couldn't they fix a hole in a boat? That was always a question that I had. What flavor of fruit is juicy fruit? Okay, that's one. Another one is, why was Tarzan always so clean? He looked like he just got out of the shower, y'all. And one last one is, why don't we ever see the headline, "Psychic wins lottery"? But I think the biggest thing for me that I really question is, I don't really understand me. And why do I do the things I do? Why don't I do the things I should do? You know, I don't know if you ever, if you know where you're at in your faith journey, but if you want to read a chapter of the Bible that really defines the human experience, it's Romans chapter 7. And basically it kind of goes like this. The things I want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do are the very things that I do. I don't know about y'all, but that's my story. How about you? That's probably your story as well. So what I want to do, Lisa, real quick, because you know I am a pastor, and be careful giving a pastor a microphone, right? I want to give you a couple truths today that I've learned in my journey. And the first one is this: behind every self-defeating act is a lie that I'm believing. You know, I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a person that's struggling with cocaine. You know, as a person that doesn't struggle with cocaine, why would you take cocaine? Well, because it brings me peace. Why would you look at porn? Because the lie is I believe that it's going to bring me pleasure. Why would I have an affair? Because I think it's going to bring me happiness. Behind every self-defeating act is a lie that I'm believing. So when you think about when we do things that are self-destructive, the payoff is the lie, right? What we think is going to bring us happiness is actually bringing us destruction, which brings me to my little second truth, which is this: to stop defeating myself, I've got to stop deceiving myself. There was a world-class sinner in the Bible. His name was David. He wrote most of the Psalms. A lot of the songs that we sing in church actually were written about 3,000 years ago. And David wrote an incredible chapter called Psalm 51, which is actually on the back of your Rooms to Heal pamphlet there. You'll see on the back of it, it talks about Psalm 51 Psalm. And he says this in Psalm 51. He says, God created me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. I think it's really interesting. He didn't say, I'm going to create in me a clean heart. I'm going to have some help. There are no self-made men and self-made women. God built us for community. In the first chapter, in the first book, God says it's not good for man to be alone. Created me a clean heart, renew a right spirit within me. Then he goes on down in verse 17 and he says this: a humble and a contrite spirit God will not despise. You know, I appreciate the honesty and the transparency. I wish we had more of that in church and other places in life, to be honest with you. Because often in our church, I'll ask this question: how many of you, I'm going to ask this question here, how many of you in this room have ever felt like, God, I feel like I'm going crazy? Can I see just a hand in there? God, I feel like I'm going crazy. Well, I've got my hand up too, okay? And here's what I like to say. You're not crazy, you're broken. Right? I'm broken. Lisa's broken. Andrew's broken. You're broken. And really what breaks us, y'all, I think there's two enemies that we all have, that we all struggle with: guilt and shame. Guilt and shame will put you in the grave. So how do we get past that? Here's what I believe. Freedom in life comes when you choose what's going to control you. Freedom comes when you choose what's going to control you. Now, for me personally, I've asked Jesus Christ to be the controlling factor in my life. I like to say it like this: when I'm mastered by the Master, I can master anything. But I know I can't do it alone. I can't do it by myself. So I would just encourage all of us to, when we run across people who are struggling, particularly with pornography. I've told my brother Andrew and Lisa, who I love, both of them, when I sit down with a young man today, and I don't even ask him if he's looking at porn. I just say, hey brother, that porn's cancer. It's poison. Stop looking at it. And he says the same thing. I know I need to. Because it is a scourge. It's a cancer on our society. And unfortunately, as Andrew said, it starts very young. I don't know, I'm one of the older guys in the room. I thank God I was born before we had the internet. I really am. I feel for these 10, 11, 12-year-old boys who got access. I had no access to the internet. The only thing we had access to was magazines. And to know that a click away, you can have something, and I agree with you 100%, sister, that changes the chemistry of your brain. That literally is like crack cocaine. And listen, to get off crack cocaine, you need a miracle. And to get off of a sexual addiction, it requires a team, really a miracle. And that's why I'm so thankful for Lisa and her transparency, for Andrew and his transparency. And I think we, in the season we're in, we desperately need room to heal. They have a wonderful nonprofit that Andrew's going to tell you a little bit about that helps. I've referred many people in our church, where our church is full of broken people. By the way, every church is full of broken people. Every place of employment is full of broken people. And I'm so glad there is a room to heal. I want to thank you for your time of being here today. And I want you, if you wouldn't mind, let's give a big hand clap to Andrew.
Thanks, everybody. So, on the back of your pamphlet, you'll see something called the Psalm 51 Fund. This is a nonprofit fund we started very early this year. And the goal is that so many people need help with this. And a lot of guys that were in my shoes, right, that have tried a bunch of different things and are still struggling, right? Sometimes we just need an additional level of support, right? And, inpatient treatment's very expensive. And for a lot of guys, getting a little additional accountability, a little additional support, for a few months can make all the difference and really lay a rock solid foundation for recovery. So there's a little QR code, I think, and
Yeah, there's a QR code and you can donate, and I just appreciate anyone who wants to. You can donate on a monthly basis, or you can do a single donation. But this really hits families so hard. The kids need therapy, the spouse does as well, in addition to the coaching. And therapists that have this specialty, they're really good at what they do, and they're in high demand, and so they don't have time to mess with insurance. And so it's a very expensive endeavor. And a lot of times we see families have to prioritize the person who's struggling with addiction over the family and spouse, and it just kills me. And I know in our story, we had to sell our house to make everything work at the end of it, and there have been plenty of other people who've had to do that. I would say about 30% of the people who reach out to us do not have the means to get the help that they need. So that's why we started the scholarship fund, so that Andrew and I are not funding all of those. And
it's really so we want to be able to meet the need of anyone that really needs us, or that needs the help that we provide. Really on the front end, we function like a triage unit, and we're objective. If people need to go to inpatient treatment, we've got great places to refer them to. People just need a really, really good clinician. We've got great relationships with excellent clinicians. And then sometimes they really do need something like what we offer. And we want to be able to meet that need regardless of what it is. And so that's the Psalm 51 Fund helps us provide for that. So anyone that that might be willing to contribute, we would love to be introduced to them. And any contributions you guys would be willing to make would be a huge blessing. And I think to close, there are a number of guys in this room that are in recovery. And I don't want to name them, but I do know that this particular struggle is not something that you can just kind of make a post on Facebook that, hey, I've been sober for 5 years, right? You see it with alcohol, you see it with drugs, but you don't see a whole lot with porn or sex addiction or anything like that. So again, without naming names, I wonder if we can just applaud the guys in the room who are on this journey, who are willing to face this thing. And because it takes so much courage to be willing to do this and to really look in the mirror and say, hey, I got to deal with this. So if we can just do that. thank you everyone for being here. It's a huge blessing, and yeah, thanks guys.
Good job.